It started as nothing more than a routine traffic stop. But by the time the sun dipped beneath the horizon of Sacramento's skyline, what unfolded would become a career-defining moment, one that would expose buried tensions and force a reckoning not only for one police officer, but for an entire department. Eric Porter had just wrapped up another long day at the office. The air conditioning in his sedan whispered quietly as he adjusted the dial, trying to shake off the weight of meetings, deadlines, and decisions. The city moved around him in its usual rhythm, cars honking in the distance, bikes zipping by, the occasional laughter of pedestrians echoing off brick walls. Sacramento was alive, golden in the light of sunset. He didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. Just a smooth drive home, maybe a quiet dinner and some rest. But fate had other plans. As he approached an intersection, the light blinked from green to yellow. Eric eased his foot off the gas and began to slow, crossing just as the signal turned red. It was a judgment call, one most drivers make every day. But that's when the unmistakable glare of red and blue filled his rearview mirror. The sharp cry of a police siren followed. Eric pulled over calmly, the experience familiar. He rolled down his window and waited. From the patrol car behind him emerged Officer Bradley Larson, mid-30s, buzz-cut, posture rigid with the kind of confidence forged from years of authority. His presence alone seemed to declare control. But it wasn't just control he sought tonight. Larson approached the car with slow, deliberate steps. His eyes were sharp, scanning, judging, calculating. The stop began like any other, a request for license and registration, a question about the traffic light. But something beneath the surface shifted almost immediately. Officer Larson didn't see just a driver. He saw a possibility, a suspicion not rooted in any real violation, but in something unspoken, something personal. His demeanor changed, posture tightening, tone sharpening. He asked questions that hinted at something more than a traffic stop. "Where are you headed? You're not from around here, are you?" Eric answered each question calmly, measured. His responses didn't falter, and his gaze never dropped. But his composure only seemed to provoke the officer further. Larson leaned in closer, searching for a crack in the armor. But there was none. Then came the demand. "Step out of the car." Eric's fingers briefly tightened around the steering wheel, not in fear, but in preparation. This wasn't new to him. It wasn't unfamiliar. It was just exhausting. He complied, rising from his seat, his tailored suit and polished shoes painting a picture that contrasted sharply with the image Larson had projected onto him. A businessman, a professional. Yet none of that seemed to matter. Larson led him to the front of the car, hands on the hood. A search for weapons, the officer claimed. Eric's brow barely lifted in disbelief. A weapon? The implication was absurd, but he didn't resist. He didn't argue. He complied. The search that followed wasn't just about finding something. It was about asserting dominance. Larson's hands moved with purpose, but Eric remained still, unshaken. His silence spoke volumes. "You're clean," the officer finally muttered, disappointment thinly veiled. And still, it wasn't over. Questions turned pointed. Larson's words hinted at frustration, maybe even resentment. Who was this man who didn't shrink beneath scrutiny? Why didn't he show fear? Eric answered with quiet strength. Not arrogance, not defiance, just truth. That was when Larson said it, almost. "People like you." He didn't finish the sentence, but the damage had already been done. Eric stood, silent, not out of shock, but calculation. The moment was revealing, and he knew it. This wasn't just about him. It was about every man who had stood where he stood, every woman pulled over, every person subjected to suspicion for no reason beyond appearance. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Eric reached slowly into his coat, his voice calm. "I'm reaching for my badge." Larson's eyes followed the motion, his hand twitching toward his holster out of instinct. But it wasn't a weapon that emerged. It was identification, a badge, the truth. Eric Porter, head of Internal Affairs, Sacramento Division. Silence, deafening, crushing. Larson froze, the color drained from his face. The man he had profiled, searched, and subtly threatened was the one tasked with investigating officers like him. Eric's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He laid out the truth, not just of what happened that night, but of what it represented. The profiling, the assumptions, the belief that he wouldn't know his rights, that he wouldn't push back, that he wasn't someone deserving of respect. "You didn't see me," Eric said. "You saw what you wanted to see." Larson handed back the documents, his hands trembling. Eric's final words before returning to his car carried the weight of judgment and truth. The badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you accountable to everyone. And with that, he was gone. But for Eric Porter, the story didn't end on the side of that road. It began the next morning. He sat at his desk, the morning light spilling across the file in front of him. Officer Bradley Larson, complaints, patterns, warnings that had gone unaddressed. And suddenly, it was no longer about one officer. It was about a system. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant handed over reports. One stack among many. There were others like Larson. Too many. Later that day, Eric stood before Chief Daniels. He laid out everything, the stop, the profiling, the pattern of behavior, and he said what needed to be said. Quiet doesn't fix anything. It lets it fester. He called for change, not a small tweak. A full-scale department review, training, protocols, accountability. He expected pushback. Instead, the chief leaned forward, quiet and serious. "You're going to ruffle some feathers." Eric didn't hesitate. "Good. It's time someone did." The following weeks were relentless. Forums with the public, closed-door meetings, late nights combing through files. Eric led the charge not to destroy the department, but to heal it, to rebuild it on principles that had long been forgotten. Larson was suspended after a formal hearing, but Eric never saw that as the real victory. The real win was the conversation that began, one that echoed across the city and through every badge that was worn. Months later, Eric stood before a crowd, officers, community members, city leaders. "Justice," he said, "isn't just about catching criminals. It's about how we treat the people we're sworn to protect." The applause that followed was long and loud. But Eric didn't smile for recognition. This wasn't about him. It was about something larger. It was about what happens when someone dares to demand better from within the system. It was about accountability, about courage, and most of all, it was about change. If this story resonated with you, share it. Let it spark conversations that matter, conversations that bring light to dark places. Subscribe to hear more stories like this, stories that remind us of who we are and who we can be, because change doesn't come easy. But it always starts with someone brave enough to say, "This isn't right, and I won't be silent."